Hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 22.3B. I've entitled this video, Challenges Facing West Africa. This video is going to cover pages 688 to 689. Challenges facing the region. Many West African countries face serious problems. To improve their situations, they must deal with these challenges and more. Bad economies, corrupt governments, out-of-control population growth, disease, and poorly funded schools. Question number 1. What are 5 major challenges and issues facing many West African countries? Number 1, bad economies. Number 2, corrupt governments. 3, out-of-control population growth. Number 4, disease. And number 5, poorly funded schools. Government and economics. The European powers that colonized Africa built the colony's economies on a few key resources, such as petroleum, gold, peanuts, or copper. The infrastructure, or underlying framework of the colonies, was built around those key resources. Once the colonies achieved independence, it became important for them to develop a variety of different industries. Otherwise, any drop in the world price of a key resource would greatly affect a country's economy. Many foreign governments invested money in developing the industrial base of the new African countries. In many cases, money from the loans was not used wisely. As a result, the invested money did not yield high returns. West African countries were not only dealing with struggling economies, but also faced enormous debt. Question number 2, what does the word infrastructure mean? Well, we could use the textbook definition over here and then the one I found online. So the infrastructure would be the underlying framework of the colonies, but basically what we're talking about are physical things like roads, power lines, schools, and these are the things inside a country that facilitate or make easier commerce, making money, transportation, moving people, and quality of life. And so if you don't have a lot of good infrastructure, it makes it very hard for newly independent countries to find success early on. Question number 3. What happened with some of the investments that were put into some of the new African countries? Well, some of those investments were not used wisely. Sometimes corrupt governments would take the money, and as a result, the invested money didn't yield high returns. So the people that gave the loans were not satisfied with the results. Question number 4. What 2 major issues were West African countries left facing because of the lack of success with the investments? They had a struggling economy as number 1, and then 2, they were left with a ton of debt. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank have declared that no poor or developing country should have to pay a debt it cannot possibly manage. Debt relief has been important for countries such as Ghana, which suffered from bad economic choices and political instability. Ghana is now a model for economic and political reform in West Africa. Nigeria benefited from debt relief as well and was able to pay off the remainder of what it owed in 2006. And here you can see a map of Africa and the debt burden that a lot of these countries face. And as you can see, based on the color scheme, there are a lot of countries in Africa that this is a huge issue for. Question number 5. What declaration did the IMF and the World Bank make about debt? They said that no poor or developing country should be required to pay debt that they can't possibly handle. A very interesting thing said by the IMF and the World Bank. Number 6, what is debt relief and how did it help some of the countries in West Africa? So as the picture shows here, debt relief is a process by which you try to make it easier for countries, in this case, sometimes you're also talking about people, but countries to get out of the crutch of debt that just the crunch of it. So there's different ways you can do that. You can consolidate debt, you can manage it, you can settle it. Sometimes some debts are forgiven or basically it's told it's no longer there. But basically the concept of debt relief is to make, in this case, countries feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel, that they can eventually pay back the money they owe, or at least some of that debt can also be forgiven. And how did it help some of the countries in West Africa? Well, countries like Nigeria and Ghana, it did allow them to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And now Nigeria and Ghana are much better equipped to have a successful future than they were in the past. A major challenge for the region is that as the population grows, the demand for food and jobs grows. An economy does not have a chance to grow if it cannot meet the needs of a growing population. And this has always been something that's been talked about in society. Malthusian had a concept here, basically, and what he said is, you have to watch the population growth because you need to make sure there's enough food to feed the people. And there comes a certain point, as you can see here, where the food required is higher than the people that are basically producing the food that's produced. And so this is a very tricky concept. And so for question number 7, 2 challenges facing West Africa because of a growing population. There is demand for more food and there's demand for more jobs. Question number 8, what can hold back an economy in a country? If it cannot meet the needs of its growing population, then it's never going to be able to truly grow in the way it wants to. Health and education. 34 million people in the world are living with the HIV virus, and 22.9 million of them live in Africa south of the Sahara. Think about that. Of course, these statistics are not completely modern, as this book is a couple years old, but basically think about when this book was published a couple years ago. 34 million people had HIV, and of that 34 million in the world, 22.9 of them live in the countries in Africa that are south of the Sahara Desert. Wow. Dealing with such a large number of HIV-infected people presents several challenges. The first challenge is to supply health care to the growing number of people who carry the virus. The second challenge is to reduce the number of new HIV infections, usually through education. The third challenge is to deal with the families and communities hurt by AIDS-related deaths. Question number 9. What major health crisis is crippling Africans who live south of the Sahara Desert? HIV/AIDS. Question 10. What are 3 challenges facing Africa as they try to deal with so many HIV-infected people? Number 1, supplying the health care for the people who have it and are carrying it. Number 2, reducing the number of new cases, and usually that's through education, teaching people how it spreads. And 3, helping the families and communities that have been affected greatly by these AIDS and HIV/related deaths. West Africa has a high birth rate and the population is growing quickly, but life expectancy is still short compared to other parts of the world. Healthcare is an issue in large cities, but it is an even greater issue in rural areas. The population of West Africa is young. For West Africa to have a sound future, educational systems must effectively prepare young people for economic and social development. A lack of education funding means that some countries cannot afford to make updates or improvements to their schools. Question number 11. What kind of birth rate does West Africa have? It has a high birth rate, meaning there are a lot of children being born in West Africa. Question number 12. How is life expectancy in West Africa compared to the rest of the world? It's still short compared to other parts of the world. So they're having a lot of children, but the average life expectancy is much lower in West Africa than in other parts of the world. And the last question, 13, due to the young population that West Africa has, what will they need to effectively prepare young people for economic and social development? They're going to need better education and better schools, and they're going to need improvements and updates in that educational system if they want to have these young people prepared for the future of the 21st century. Well, thank you so much for watching. Before we go, I have a little meme here. Birth rate, death rate. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.